Welcome to The Whole Story. I'm Anderson Cooper. The assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk is the latest in a string of attacks on public figures on both the left and the right. Kirk was speaking to a large crowd at Utah Valley University on Wednesday when an assassin, roughly 150 yards away, fired on him, shooting him in the neck. Kirk was 31 years old. He was the co-founder of Turning Point USA and a prominent supporter of President Trump, who credits Kirk with mobilizing young voters. As you know, President Trump himself was the target of a gunman during an assassination attempt at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, one of two such attempts on his life. Sadly, our history is full of other political figures who've been targeted, from Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in the 1960s to the shootings of two Minnesota state lawmakers and their families this past June. In the next hour, which we first aired in the days after President Trump was shot, CNN's Sara Sidner examines the roots of political violence in America and looks at how these type of attacks have changed our country's history.
Just past 6 on a Saturday evening outside Pittsburgh.
Hello, Butler, and hello to Pennsylvania.
A political rally is about to devolve into political violence.
Yeah, look, there he is.
Because we have millions and millions of people in our country.
Attendees spot a gunman on a roof about 2 minutes before shots ring out.
I was able to see him perfectly, and I seen he had the gun. My wife ran up to law enforcement, but they couldn't seem to see him. They were too close to the building.
Take a look at what happened.
You can see the awareness of that gunfire almost register on the president's face as he looks around.
Within seconds, President Trump is whisked off stage. There is blood coming from the top of his right ear.
I saw Donald Trump get hit. I looked down, I saw the man died in the bleachers.
The man was a spectator, Corey Compratore, 50 years old, father of two, a volunteer firefighter. Two other people in the crowd received wounds described as life-altering.
You can see the guy down. I think they hit him because the guy he looks dead.
The 20-year-old shooter, armed with his father's legally purchased AR-style rifle, was shot dead at the scene.
Bro, he's wounded?
I'm not shocked that this happened. I'm shocked that I was sitting there and it happened next to me. We shouldn't be at a level of political discourse in this country where this is going on. It feels like it's 1960 again.
The idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of.
But history has shown that's not true.
Our whole history in the United States is anchored around constant spasms of violence. I mean, we were born in the American Revolution with events like the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party. Throughout presidential history, they're always a target from a would-be assassin.
The last U.S. president shot was Ronald Reagan. That was 1981, when a bullet pierced his lung, nearly killing him. Patty Davis is his daughter. What was your gut reaction when you saw that yet another assassin tried to take out, in this case, a former president, after what you've been through?
One of the things that I was struck by was some of the attendees, after Donald Trump was taken off the stage, turning around to the media and giving them the finger, and you could read their lips, and the words that were coming out went right along with that middle finger. Someone just died in the stands behind you. Two other people are critically wounded. The candidate who you support was just taken off with blood in the side of his head, and that's your reaction? That kind of anger, anger doesn't stay within the confines of words and gestures. It metastasizes, it turns into violent actions.
Those violent actions are usually dubbed political violence. Reuters news agency identified 213 of them in the 2 years following January 6th, 2021.
If you look at our country's history, we see, generally speaking, a rise in political violence in these moments of great social change. In the period since 2008, 2009, we've seen enormous political and social change in this country. And that has led to increased incidents of political violence and the use of violent rhetoric.
Professor Robert Pape and his team at the University of Chicago took a look at the amount of so-called lone wolf attacks on members of Congress.
What we found is that threats to members of Congress, both Republican members of Congress and Democratic members of Congress, rose five-fold on an annual basis starting in 2017, with the first year of the Trump presidency.
One of the most violent examples of this was in 2017, when an apparent Bernie Sanders supporter fired on Republican congressmen practicing for a charity baseball game, gravely wounding Steve Scalise, then Majority Whip.
We've learned a chilling new development. Hodgkinson was found with a list of names on him, including members that were at that baseball field at the time.
James Hodgkinson died following a shootout with police. In 2022, Paul Pelosi, husband of then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, dialed 911 after a man broke into their home and stood by listening to his call.
This gentleman just came into the house, and he wants to wait there for my wife to come home.
Do you know who the person is?
No, I don't know who he is. He told me not to do anything.
What is your address, sir?
Drop the hammer.
Nope.
When police arrived,
What is going on right now?
This disturbing body camera video shows the intruder hitting Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer, fracturing his skull.
You were the intended target.
Yeah.
The assailant has told police, it's in a sworn affidavit, that he wanted to take you hostage, interrogate you, break your kneecaps with the hammer if you didn't give him the answers that he wanted.
For me, this is really the hard part because Paul was not the target, and he's the one who's paying the price.
In 2011, the nation was sent into shock when Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot in the head while simply meeting with constituents in a Tucson parking lot. 6 people were killed there, including a 9-year-old girl. And Giffords, severely wounded, had to resign from office. In 2022, the target was the FBI after it searched Donald Trump's Florida home in Mar-a-Lago looking for classified documents.
When an individual drove to the Cincinnati field office of the FBI and tried to break into it because he was told on Truth Social time and time again that the FBI is the enemy of the people, that the FBI is coming to your town soon to take your guns away from you.
That would-be intruder was shot and killed. Also in 2022, a man with a pistol and a plan to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh called police on himself, according to law enforcement. He was arrested near Kavanaugh's home. But this recent political violence is about more than just so-called lone wolves. Of course, there's January 6th, 2021, when several thousand Trump supporters who had been told the presidential election was stolen stormed the U.S. Capitol, trying to prevent the results from being certified. At least 5 people died. And approximately 140 officers were injured in the most violent attack on the Capitol in more than 200 years.
Let's not forget the attempt to kidnap Governor Whitmer in Michigan.
That was in 2020. 11 of 14 men were convicted and sentenced to prison for plotting to kidnap Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. On top of all this, there have been a slew of mass shootings that you might not think of as political violence, but they were. In 2018, a shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, 11 worshipers killed there. The 2019 shooting at a crowded El Paso Walmart, 23 were murdered, and the shooter wrote a disturbing manifesto.
The author encourages immigrants to return to their home countries, speaking of a Hispanic invasion.
And there was the 2022 attack on a grocery store in a black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York. 10 people died there.
It is very clear, investigators say, that he came here to target the black community.
with the Tree of Life shooting, the El Paso shooting, and then also with the Buffalo shooting, is these are generally motivated by this right-wing idea called the Great Replacement, which is the idea that Democrats are deliberately adopting policies to replace the white electorate. The target group in each case, Jews, Hispanics, and blacks, varies. But in their writings, they unify this. They explain how they're hoping that will produce political results.
That same conspiracy theory was behind the 2017 white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where a counter-protester was run over and killed.
There have been moments in American history that tend to be very violent. The 1850s and the decade before the Civil War is one. The 1960s and the Civil Rights era is one. We're living in one that seems to be one of those eras as well. And in all of those times, what you have is a moment when something dramatic may be changing in American history. In the 1850s, that's the fate of slavery. In the 1960s, that's people having more civil rights. Now it's pretty much the question of democracy.
We'll examine all of that ahead.
A dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet.
November 22nd, 1963. President John F. Kennedy and First Lady Jackie Kennedy land in Dallas. Excited crowds line the streets as the motorcade winds its way through the city. When suddenly, shots ring out.
There have been shootings. The first unconfirmed reports say the president was hit in the head.
The pair of men have just administered the last rites of the Catholic Church to President Kennedy. President Kennedy has been assassinated.
John F. Kennedy's assassination came as a shock to all Americans and to the world.
The Kennedy assassination, one of the first real televised acts of political violence that is captured in real time.
When President Kennedy was killed, it felt like the entire nation was in great mourning.
Martin Luther King III was just 6 years old at the time.
I remember thinking, what is going to happen now in our nation, because the Kennedy administration represented progress for communities of color.
There have been moments in American history that tend to be very violent. The 1960s and the Civil Rights era is one. In the 1960s, entrenched white power holders who are not really excited about more marginalized people getting more civil rights. You have people who feel threatened.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously delivered these transformative words on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, less than 3 months before revelry turned to tragedy and President John F. Kennedy was killed.
Little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Your father gave the I Have a Dream speech that almost everybody in the world can recite at least part of it. Is the dream realized?
Absolutely not. Dad envisioned a nation where freedom and justice and equality would be real for all humankind. We're not there yet. It was a vision that can happen.
It's up to each and every one of us to do our part in making that dream a reality.
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
On April 3rd, 1968, his final sermon proved prophetic. Less than 24 hours later, Dr. King was assassinated.
Dad was not killed because he was talking about people riding in the front of buses or being able to sit down at lunch counters. Dad was killed because he was talking about a reshift of economic priorities, making sure that there was opportunity for everyone.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee.
On the night of Dr. King's murder, then presidential candidate and Senator Robert F. Kennedy spoke to a large crowd on the streets of Indianapolis, filmed by local news Wish TV.
You can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, black people amongst blacks and white amongst whites, filled with hatred toward one another.
Around the time of Dad's assassination, over 100 cities went up in flames. Indianapolis, where Robert Kennedy was, did not. That was a magical moment.
Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that is spread across our land with an effort to understand, compassion, and love.
It was beautiful, heartfelt, eloquent speech by a man who sadly would lose his life to a bullet within a matter of months.
I think that we can end the divisions within the United States.
Just 2 months after Dr. King's assassination, CBS News covered Senator Kennedy's victory in the California Democratic primary.
And that what has been going on within the United States over the period of the last 3 years, the divisions, the violence, the disenchantment with our society, the divisions, whether it's between blacks and whites, between the poor and the more affluent, or between age groups, or on the war in Vietnam, that we can start to work together.
That evening at the Ambassador Hotel, he was shot in the back kitchen in mysterious fashion by Sirhan Sirhan.
Senator Kennedy was involved in a shooting.
The last report was hit twice in the head, once in the hip.
Losing King and Robert Kennedy in the same season was bad enough, but it reminded Americans of JFK's assassination less than 5 years before.
I was just a baby when my Uncle Bobby was killed, but I just know what a loss it was, not only for their children, my cousins, but a loss for everybody that knew them and knew how much they wanted to change the world. They had so much promise and so much inspiration and hope as part of their whole message.
Patrick J. Kennedy served 16 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is the nephew to President John F. Kennedy and Senator Bobby Kennedy, and the son of the late Senator Ted Kennedy.
I know in my father's case, he had many instances where he was attacked. Most of them were never reported on because of the worry that even in reporting on them, you would encourage further acts of violence. And so we lived in a home where there were bulletproof vests in every closet in our house.
It is profoundly upsetting to hear that bulletproof vests were a part of everyday life, that those were just around because of what's happened to your family. Do you think it's worse than the 60s politically?
Well, it certainly feels like it. In the 60s, we lost a lot of leadership currency from President Kennedy to Medgar Evers, to Malcolm X, to Dad. So we lost gigantic leadership forces. in less than a 10-year period. And then in the 70s, there was a political assassination attempt of George Wallace.
The powerfully divisive George Wallace infamously blocked the doors to stop desegregation at the University of Alabama. He was Alabama's governor during the Birmingham sit-ins, where peaceful protesters were met with fire hoses and attack dogs. The bombing of the Birmingham 16th Street Baptist Church, which killed 4 little black girls. And the 1965 Selma March, which devolved into what is known as Bloody Sunday.
Don't worry about what the newspapers say about us. They call us extremists and want to say we are fascists.
Wallace spoke to this Madison Square Garden crowd during his 1968 presidential bid.
George Wallace was fighting elites. Wallace also rallied disaffected members of the working class. He fashioned himself a white populist. His appeal was always a racial appeal.
But his 1972 campaign would be the turning point.
He was shot in a shopping mall in Maryland, and he became crippled to the point he could never walk again.
He always thought he might be shot. He always believed it would be a head wound, and he would die from that.
Why did he think that?
Because he was so volatile. He was very controversial, and he knew that. And he knew he well might be shot. He was resigned to that, though.
Do you think in any way, shape, or form that some of his vitriol, some of the way that he spoke, actually encouraged the violence that was perpetrated on him?
He had been raised to believe that segregation was in the best interest of both races. He was a man of deep faith. He had a lot of regrets, Sarah, about what his early positions.
Do you think the attempted assassination on your father's life catapulted him to change?
The shooting, when he suffered so much every day from constant chronic pain, he realized he had caused suffering to others. And that bothered him until the day he died.
George Wallace did not retire from public life, but George Wallace changed, or at least he decided to change his appeal.
He would then meet with people like Jesse Jackson, the King family, John Lewis, and ask them for forgiveness.
He refashioned himself as a more tolerant, more open-minded George Wallace. And when he ran again for governor of Alabama, and he did so successfully, he campaigned for black votes.
During the last race for governor, he received 90% of the black vote.
I made a mistake, and that's all pay in the past, and I'm sorry that I did that because it gave the wrong opinion of the kind of man that I was.
Coming up, the country's violent origins and the assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan.
We interrupt. There's been a late development. Shots reported fired outside the hotel where President Reagan spoke a short while ago.
Ronald Reagan's daughter, Patty Davis, had to watch the assassination attempt on her father with the rest of the world.
I didn't know any more that day, that long day, than everybody else did. I was sitting in front of the television.
He was wounded. My God. The president was hit.
In March 1981, President Ronald Reagan was shot along with a Secret Service agent, a D.C. police officer, and the White House press secretary.
I couldn't get through to my mother in the hospital. I tried, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know if he was going to live.
He was wounded in the left chest, we are told.
The Secret Service wouldn't let me take a commercial plane because they have to assume the worst. So I and my brother Michael and my sister Maureen took this Army transport plane at the end of the day and got into Washington at like 2 in the morning.
His condition is stable. A decision is now being made whether or not to operate to remove the bullet.
The bullet glanced off the car and then went into her body.
The shooting unmoored Americans. After the tumultuous 1960s, violence had again struck the leader of the free world. This time it was a product of a disturbed mind with access to a gun.
The Secret Service confirms the name of the suspect as that of John W. Hinckley, Jr.
One of the most protected men in the world had now become the target of gun violence. What were the days like immediately following the attempted assassination of President Reagan, your dad?
My most lasting memory was the shift of mood in this country and the people who came up to me, who I'm sure were not all supporters of my father, where politics was set aside and they were simply coming to me with compassion and with humanity and with the awareness that I had almost lost my father.
The American people rallied to Ronald Reagan, regardless of their political point of view. The country shared a sense of trauma and grief and concern. The assassination attempt did not divide us.
As soon as he came out of the hospital, the first thing he did was the very next day, he went up to Capitol Hill for a joint session of the Congress. And they were up roaring with support for him.
Thank you very much.
The country pulled around Reagan. He had said in the diaries that I've edited, when I woke up in the hospital, I had been staring at the ceiling only to realize that I'm now going to give my life to God. That this was such a near-death experience that I'm going to make the world safer to live in by reducing nuclear weapons. And he did go about that with Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1980s.
Once he left the White House, President Reagan also softened his stance on gun control, partly because his press secretary, James Brady, was paralyzed from the shooting and remained in a wheelchair for the rest of his life.
Jim Brady suffered very significant brain injuries as a result of the shooting.
Unable to return to his dream job serving as White House press secretary, he and his wife Sarah became champions for gun safety legislation that would eventually be known as the Brady Bill.
They were lifelong Republicans. They were gun owners. And of course, they had tremendous connections in Congress and obviously with Ronald Reagan himself.
The signature piece of legislation advanced by Sarah and Jim Brady was a background check law that would impose a small waiting period on those who wanted to purchase firearms and would provide for federally licensed gun dealers to conduct a background check anytime someone tried to purchase a firearm.
The Bradys were relentless advocates.
Today I can tell you how hard it is to have people speaking down to me. Yes, I experience pain sometimes so intense I cry. But nothing is harder than losing the independence and control we all have so value in our life.
In 1991, 10 years after the assassination attempt, the Brady Bill would find another powerful and unlikely advocate in the first president endorsed by the NRA, President Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan's support of the Brady Bill was a surprise to many. He had been the most forceful president in American history for the Second Amendment right to bear arms.
James and Sarah Brady, they really pushed for sensible gun laws after he was gravely injured. Did that change your dad?
It did. I think he felt responsible. Hinckley literally shot other people out of the way. I know my father felt like, well, their lives wouldn't have been changed and shattered like this if it weren't for me.
Former President Reagan wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times titled, "Why I'm For the Brady Bill."
It gave members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, cover to be able to say, well, here is President Reagan, someone who is himself a survivor of gun violence and who is a friend of the National Rifle Association, saying that this law should be passed.
Finally, in 1993, the Brady Bill became the law of the land. And an assault weapons ban followed closely behind in 1994, supported again by Reagan, flanked by former presidents from both sides of the aisle.
And there was no doubt that the advocacy of so many living presidents helped push the law towards passage.
The gun lobby was outraged by the new gun restrictions. This time, a more extreme, fringe subset of Second Amendment supporters mobilized and edged their way into the mainstream.
The extreme gun rights advocates that emerged thought that democratic and liberal policies adopted in Washington were illustrations of government grown too big and too powerful and too oppressive. That view of the right to bear arms became much more popular over the course of the 1990s and into the 2000s.
This uncompromising vision of an absolute Second Amendment right stymied future gun legislation and dominated right-wing politics.
Guns are clearly embedded into our national identity.
The assault weapons ban passed in 1994 included a provision that forced Congress to reauthorize it after 10 years or it would expire.
The NRA and the gun rights movement were instrumental in defeating the reauthorization of the assault weapons ban. And there was no longer sufficient support in Washington, D.C. for a ban on these military-style rifles. The law expired in 2004, and in the decades that followed, we saw a huge increase in the number of these military-style rifles on the streets of America.
And in the aftermath of countless mass shootings, in the United States, the fallout from the gun debate has left a trail of dead and wounded in its wake. Gunmen in countless shootings use semi-automatic weapons and military-style equipment, including this attack on President Donald Trump.
We define something as political violence because of the motive of the attacker. But even a mass shooting caused by mental illness can have political consequences.
We as a country have endured the push and pull of political violence since the dawn of our democracy. Coming up, a history lesson on the roots of political violence going all the way back to the birth of the nation.
Wherever chapter we're turning to in American history, political violence is replete.
Chapter 1, Growing Pains.
In the first 12 years of the government under the Constitution, there were a series of rebellions. In one way or another, they represented American citizens who felt that something was going too far. The Whiskey Rebellion, which is a response to a tax on internal goods that Alexander Hamilton, first Secretary of the Treasury, put into play. These farmers in western Pennsylvania begin to protest about this, begin to burn down the houses of tax collectors.
This illustration from 1793 shows citizens in Pennsylvania hauling off a tax collector, tarred and feathered.
The government has been under the Constitution only since 1789. So the idea at the time that citizens are rising up and protesting against a government act is kind of terrifying, particularly those in power.
Those in power had another battle to fight, each other.
They used to take canes and just beat each other in the Senate. We used to have duels.
The duel between Vice President Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, former Secretary of the Treasury, takes place in 1804. For any elite politician, your reputation mattered. And if you were dishonored in a serious way, then he would probably not gain office. So Burr is dishonored by Hamilton several times, challenging Hamilton to a duel.
Aaron Burr, the then Vice President of the United States, kills Alexander Hamilton.
America's first assassination attempt against a president happens in 1835 against Andrew Jackson.
Jackson, the 7th Commander-in-Chief.
A British-American house painter named Richard Lawrence was waiting on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Lawrence pulled out a pistol and directly shot at Jackson, and the pistol misfired. Lawrence was someone who was mentally unstable, but what's interesting about this very first assassination attempt is that it was politicized. People began pointing to Jackson's enemies, and other people claim that it was fake. It was a ploy for Jackson to get sympathy.
Soon, America would face its deadliest war.
Anybody who's going to look at America in the 1850s and 1860s will tell you we are a lot more violent than it is today.
Chapter 2, The Battle to Abolish Slavery.
People, particularly Southerners, were becoming more and more extreme in what they were prepared to do to preserve slavery and to fight back against abolitionists and anti-slavery advocates.
The 16th U.S. President, Abraham Lincoln, led the Union, the North, against the Confederacy, the South.
Brother against brother, it is. And on our own home ground, it's a bloody, violent civil war.
Historians estimate roughly 750,000 people were killed.
At the moment of Lincoln's triumph, he gets gunned down. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, killing Lincoln.
Lincoln was shot in the back of the head, the first presidential assassination in America.
We see an uptick in political violence.
1865, the birth of the Ku Klux Klan.
The Klan really is one of the earliest and most aggressive actors that we see attempting to use political violence to achieve their goals. The Klan at the local level really taking steps to push back efforts to bring about civil rights through lynching, burning down black churches.
In 1881, James Garfield was shot at a railroad station and later died. The gunman, Charles Guiteau, shot the 20th U.S. president because he refused to appoint him as an ambassador to Europe. Garfield's assassin also had a history of mental health issues.
Then you get a third Republican killed, William McKinley, in 1901.
The 25th U.S. president was shot and killed at the World's Fair in Buffalo, New York.
He pulled out right at close range and shot McKinley.
It would be more than 60 years, though, before another U.S. president was assassinated. But the attempts continued.
Theodore Roosevelt becomes president after McKinley. He gets shot by a little anarchist in Milwaukee. Franklin Roosevelt, a would-be assassin, came in, put bullets all around him. Harry Truman, one day he was looking out the window and a group of Puerto Rican assassins were there. And Gerald Ford had two very serious assassination attempts.
When we come back.
We become totally unhinged if Donald Trump is not elected.
We're in a really concerning place.
Enough is enough.
In the hours and days following the attack, calls for unity came swiftly from both sides of the aisle.
The greatest threat to America right now is the fact that we're horribly divided.
We need a unified message. We need to turn the temperature down.
You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down.
On the last night of the RNC, former President Trump began with a message of unity.
Thank you very much. In an age when
our politics too often divide us. Now is the time to remember that we are all fellow citizens. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
But he then turned back to attacking his political enemies.
Crazy Nancy Pelosi, the whole thing.
Others at the RNC also returned to extremely divisive language.
Biden and the Democrats are doing everything they can to tear down this great country.
Illegal immigrants that the Democrats have released.
We become totally unhinged if Donald Trump is not elected in November.
After the assassination of JFK, the country did not engage in finger pointing afterwards. The assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, Republicans did not blame Democrats for this attack on the president.
J.D. Vance immediately blamed Democrats, and he posted the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs.
Congressman Mike Collins posting on X that President Biden, quote, sent the orders.
Joe Biden told his donors that it's time to put Trump in a bullseye.
Folks,
President Biden has had very harsh rhetoric.
Look, I believe that the president is literally an existential threat.
You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
Trump in particular is known for despicable language.
Knock the crap out of him. Like to punch him in the face.
So he shouldn't be forgiven, and January 6th shouldn't be forgotten simply because of Butler, Pennsylvania.
You'll never take back our country with weakness.
I think we should absolutely be concerned about the risk that the rhetoric poses. We've seen the impact at the Unite the Right rally on January 6th. And so it's incumbent upon these individuals who do have these platforms to not lean into that rhetoric.
The question is, will a lone act of political violence be followed by an intensification of political violence?
Telegram channels for branches of the Proud Boys militia group have been calling for civil war and violence.
Personally, I'm still afraid of civil war.
I think to think of it as a civil war makes it too neat and tidy an idea for whatever comes next.
We don't have the preconditions necessary for a civil war, but we do have the preconditions for more political violence.
So it's possible bad things might happen. It's also possible that people might use this moment to work for something good, to bolster democracy because they now realize it needs to be bolstered and protected.
This is one of those moments where we should take a deep breath and look at our history and saying enough is enough.
It is America right now, but let's maybe decide that it's not the America we want it to be. How about that?
Now, more than ever, we'll need to depend on one another to achieve our goals for this country.
My father used to say, we can fly in the air like birds.
We've learned to swim the seas like fish, and yet we haven't learned to walk the earth as brothers and sisters.
We've got to figure out how do we create a better nation and world for all of God's children.
We want to hear each other. And we're not feeling that in America today. We're not feeling that we're hearing each other.
But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times.